right, guys, this is like a reunion episode. We grew up in the 90s. Remember like 90s sitcoms? Sometimes they do some like crossover episodes. You see people from like, didn't like Family Matters show up on Full House one time? You know, like you guys know what I'm getting at here. This is the Hoge and Jahns podcast and the Breaking In podcast. We're all back together again, so I could tell your guys' origin stories. So welcome to the program.
What's up? Welcome in. We're excited to be here.
I thought we were dead to you, Kevin. So
well,
we're just happy to be here.
You know, I promised when I started this podcast, I made a promise on your podcast that I was, you know, I've been fortunate to be on for several years. I made a promise that for the 10-year anniversary of the Hoge and Jahns podcast, you guys would be on this show. So we're doing it. We're going to get into how you guys got your start in sports media, because a lot of people want to know, like, they listen to you guys and like, how did these guys get this job? Like, how did they
probably
get here?
a lot.
Yeah. One thing that Johnsy, you wrote this recently when you debuted at CHGO. You wrote about, you know, kind of your path. I yelled at you because I wanted you to save that for the podcast, but you can rehash some of it. And you wrote something interesting, which was you talked about kind of growing up in Chicago in the 90s, and this is kind of for both of you. Like, I didn't think about it until you wrote it, Johns, but like, we had the 90s Bulls. You know, we had MJ. You know, you had the 98 home run chase with Sosa. You had Frank Thomas, a superstar. We don't really talk about what the Bears were in the 90s. But, like, Johnsy, like, there's something to be said about growing up in this city during those years, and also during kind of the peak of sports media in this town because of MJ. How did that kind of impact you guys in terms of maybe wanting to get into this?
And the Blackhawks were very good in those years. Those were the Roenick Chelios years of the 90s as well. I guess at that point, like my house, we always had sports on television. Like, I had vivid memories of playing like travel baseball games and then coming home at night and the NBA Finals would be on with Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, all those guys. Like, that's what I grew up with. That was my life. Or coming home from school and catching the end of the Cubs game, because there was 120 Cubs games during the week, and sitting down in my living room, having a snack after school and watching the Cubs game. So you kind of just lived it. That was, I don't know if I could put it any better way, but that was just always part of my life, was the Chicago sports teams, minus the Bears, because they did stink in that decade for a bit. With all due respect to Tom Waddle, when he listens.
Well, I was going to say Hoge because, you know, Hoge, you're a diehard Sox fan, and like 05, you know, there'll be nothing like 05. I mean, certainly we might never see it again based on where the team has been. But you the 05 World Series, the Bears make the Super Bowl after 06. You have the Cubs making the run in 03. Now, a lot of cities have these kind of little bursts, but I feel like if you think about like when you're a peak sports fan, like we had some pretty good teams to kind of inspire us to maybe try to find our way into this industry.
Yeah, and I don't know, for whatever reason, it was ingrained in me at a very young age. In fact, I might even have it behind me here. There's a photo of me. Maybe it is right here. This was me, 8 days old, for people watching on the video version of this.
Yes.
In the front row with my parents at Old Comiskey Park. Yeah. Literally 8 days old after I was born in April of that season, 1986. So, like, it's just like from the very start for me was always about sports. And then in the 90s, though, it was really to me about the Bulls. Like, we as a family watched Bulls games. It was just kind of what you did. If the Bulls were on, you watched it. It seems very different now. But yeah, it was the White Sox were always number one for me, and then with the Bulls in the 90s, I mean, if you were in Chicago growing up in the 90s, it was Michael Jordan.
Do you guys remember Tom Dorr? He was the one play-by-play guy for the Bulls. I remember being like in 5th or 6th grade and being at a golf tournament. The only time I've ever gone to a golf tournament, PGA Championship in Medina. And he was there. And I remember thinking, like, here's a celebrity. Like, here's a guy who called like the 90s Bulls games. And like, again, you'd watch those 90s Bulls teams. You knew all the players, and you knew everybody involved with the broadcasts, with the, I was reading a little bit probably then, reading the Tribune. You got to know all those people, and that's kind of the world that we got started in. And Jahns, I'm going to kind of start with your origin story, because I mentioned at the top you are way older than Hoge and me, so like you got to tell us, what it was like when you got started. You went to St. Norbert to play football.
I did.
Your interception of Brett Bazinet, legendary Northwestern quarterback, certainly helped get you to college for football. At what point while you're there did you think, okay, I'm thinking journalism's a path that I want to pursue?
It's funny. It actually happened at Notre Dame High School before I actually went to college. So here I am, a senior at Notre Dame High School in Niles, an all-boys private high school, and it was my Latin teacher, of all teachers, who pointed out something in my writing. I got an assignment wrong. It was supposed to be like a day in the life, and either way we were supposed to translate it into Latin, I think, but I got the whole assignment wrong. So I kind of detailed what I did for like one day. I think it was like during the football season as well. And just the style or something caught Dr. Gianfranco Grande's eye, and like he started like giving me like newspaper articles to read, Sports Illustrated articles to read, because I told him I was interested in sports. I remember like reading a bunch of stuff about Bobby Knight in Notre Dame's library because he wanted me to consider this. At that point in my life, yeah, I kind of grew up reading the newspapers. We got the Sun-Times and the Tribune. We got the Sun-Times every day and the Tribune on Sundays, if I remember correctly. So I always had the newspapers in my house, but I never thought of that as a potential career until that moment. Now flash forward to college. So I quit playing football. Actually thought about quitting college for a little bit and coming back home, and it was my wife, my future wife, Colleen, who you guys know, who told me, no, what are you, an idiot? Stay, find something. What about that writing career that you thought about for like 2 months as a high school senior? So that was it. Went into media communication, got a job at the school paper, started writing for the Green Bay News Chronicle by my senior year. I ended up doing a lot of stories on St. Norbert's for the Green Bay News Chronicle. But yeah, I guess that's kind of my story. Started at Notre Dame High School my senior year because I got an assignment wrong in my Latin class.
And for our listeners, and Hoge, you can confirm this, it's now kind of a daily occurrence, I think, where Colleen says to Jahns, what, you an idiot?
Yeah. I told her, like, she asked me what I was doing on this podcast. She's like, oh, you finally broke in. Well, I'm about to give you some credit here, Kyle, at some point during this interview. So she's been warned, as she's probably listening upstairs somewhere.
The one thing, and Jahns, we're gonna get into the Sun-Times. I have an assistant online preps editor.
Oh, yeah.
Was that the first official Sun-Times job for you?
No. So my first official Sun-Times job. So if we're going back in the time,
and tell us how you got it.
So St. Norbert connection. One of my good friends from St. Norbert's put me in contact with Dick Quagliano, a long-time stringer, freelance writer for the Chicago Sun-Times, and he passed along my resume to Steve Tucker. So at this point, this is 2005. This is when the prep sections, guys, were like thick, just full of pages and stories, tons of names, tons of coaches' names, tons of players' names, all sorts of stats, features, Q&As, all sorts of different stories, both papers. I mean, there's Taylor Bell, Tina Core, Steve Tucker, Barry Temkin, Bob Sakamoto. I mean, the newspapers in Chicago were filled with prep sports coverage, so it's competitive. So I show up for my interview at the Chicago Sun-Times. This is when they're at Wolf Point there, 350 North Orleans, if I remember correctly. And Steve Tucker, God rest his soul, answers the door at the Chicago Sun-Times in his socks. And I'm thinking, like, oh, my gosh. Like, if there's any former Sun-Times writers or prep writers out there listening to this, they probably got a big kick out of that. But I'm blown away. I'm like, this is the guy I'm going to work for? Yes, it was. So my first job in the Chicago media was answering the phone call, answering the high school phone calls on Fridays and Saturday nights. And it was chaotic. Like, that job does not exist anymore in most major cities. which is sad in so many ways, but got paid $10 an hour. We worked late nights. I remember getting home at like 1 or 2 in the morning and taking the train and all that, but all my friends are out in Lincoln Park and Wrigleyville and whatnot, and here I am Friday nights in an office answering the phones to get scores about Wabansie Valley and New Trier and whatnot.
And you're literally just typing the score in too. It's not like you're giving call. You're not like you're writing a. Are you writing like any stories? Or you're just literally putting.
So thinking about we all transcribe what we hear from Bears coaches, right? So we would take dictation sometimes from these prep writers, these stringers, and sometimes the staff members themselves, where they're on deadline and they would call in with 350 words and they would dictate it to you and you would type it up, like into the copy itself, into the page design itself, and you would make it fit. You would tell them when they were too long, and you would edit it like on the spot. So learning how to do that on a deadline, like I wish all young sports writers could go through something like that. I really do, because I think you learn a lot about yourself, learn how to handle pressure and the grind and the chaos a bit. But yeah, those positions, they don't exist anymore.
Somewhere Larry Mayer from ChicagoBears.com is listening right now and going to make a joke about your transcription timing in the media room after
but
this
that's
experience.
The thing, like I was so detailed.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm one of the few in the Bears media room who will do it like almost verbatim and try to get every this, that in there, every little stutter, because I think it's important sometimes, because it adds, I don't know, character to the interview, some value if the writer needs it. But taking those dictations with like 5 minutes to deadline can be it speeds you up a bit if you need to make it work.
Jahnsy, we're going to get back to your start, because I have a couple 2009 Adam L. Johns bylines we'll get into. Hoge, what was your version of the Latin teacher sent you on the path to sports journalism?
So I don't know if it's on the path, but I have I have a story that can go back to high school, because I was actually fired from my first journalism gig. It was senior year, and I was the sports editor of whatever St. Ignatius's newspaper was called. I can't even remember it now. And I don't even remember the circumstances. I think it was like just not, maybe 30% popularity contest situation, and 70% my horrible senioritis that I carried into my first semester at Wisconsin too. But I just always knew that I think I've always been pretty good at understanding what my strengths and weaknesses are, and I knew in high school that I hated math. Like I could get by, I could pass the classes, but I didn't enjoy it. So I purposely took AP Calculus my senior year just to make sure I could test out of having to take any math courses in college. Just get all those credits out of the way and then go into what I knew I pretty much wanted to do, which was get into journalism school and go down that path where. So I didn't take a single math class in 4 years at Wisconsin. And it was always about writing and getting better at it. And so, in fact, one of my favorite writing classes in college was a creative nonfiction class. It was part of the J school, but it really had nothing to do with journalism. It was just about writing and understanding that, it's nonfiction. It needs to be factual, but you could still get creative in how you write things. And it still sticks with me to this day. In fact, I still have the book from that class. I've saved it all these years. Sometimes I go back and look at it. So, I guess it's sort of similar. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I knew that writing was my strength, and I just wanted to get into it. And then, so the first thing I did when I got done there is I went into radio.
I did, as you saw before we started recording, I was looking at your LinkedIn. Very detailed, unlike John's, whose only thing on his LinkedIn is assistant online preps editor.
I am doing okay.
He still has that job.
Still, I think I counted like 3 internships maybe in your college years. Which of those kind of stand out, like resonate with you, like especially when you look at where you're at today, as kind of being like the one you always like to kind of talk about?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most productive was I interned with the Capital Times, which was kind of like the secondary newspaper in Madison at the time. It still exists in some form, but I say that because like I was covering the Badgers for the Daily Cardinal, the student newspaper, and so I could sort of double dip and write like a sidebar for the Capital Times at the same games I was already covering, right? So getting an actual byline, getting a story in the newspaper was really good, and on deadline was a very good experience. The one that always sticks with me the most that I certainly think back on, it certainly helped me when I eventually became sideline reporter doing Northwestern games, was I spent my senior year in the booth with Matt LePay and Mike Lucas in the actual Wisconsin Badgers radio booth during games. And really I was Matt LePay's spotter and statistician for the most part, but with the headset on, being able to hear the whole broadcast, seeing how it all worked was very, very helpful when I got thrown into being the sideline reporter, not in the booth, obviously, but understanding and being able to picture what was happening up in the booth the entire time I was downstairs, just from being able to hear what Dave Ennett and Ted Albrecht were saying. So I think that ended up really helping me a lot too, and was probably the most fun internship I had, for sure, because just being part of a live broadcast is awesome.
So while Jahns was spending Friday and Saturday nights as he got started at the Sun-Times desk, you were spending your weekend nights doing Blackhawks radio. This was pretty much right after college, right?
Yeah, so, and this is where, and for everybody listening, look, there's no doubt that we've all had some luck along the way. And so I was very fortunate to get an internship with WGN Radio. I worked actually a high school connection that also went to Wisconsin. Her name's Colleen Fahey. She managed to get a marketing internship like the season right ahead of me or whatever. So that was like enough to get my name on the desk of Dave Ennett and Mark Carman, and get me that interview. And then I was lucky enough to, get the interview, get the internship that summer of 2008 it would have been. And that happened to be the same exact summer WGN landed the Blackhawks. They moved over from the Score. And so I just happened to be in the right time, right place, right time, where, we need help producing these games. And so, because a lot of interns do a really good job. They come in, they do a great job, and there's just there's no position to hire them into. You'd love to. Happens all the time. But fortunately, I just got lucky. Hey, there's this part-time role to be able to produce the Blackhawks games. And again, I went into Wisconsin knowing almost nothing about hockey. But again, I would advise, students trying to get into this, take whatever opportunity you can get. So I joined the Wisconsin radio station. Nobody wanted to call the hockey games. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, I'll do it. And I just learned on the fly. So here I have this opportunity now a few years later where, I know hockey now. I'd love to produce these games. I did it. I called the games in college, so now I feel like I can do this for WGN. And Carm certainly didn't want to deal with hockey, for sure. So, yeah, I did that, and it just for about a season, and then the Score had another thing, and sort of a right place, right time. They had an opportunity, and that's when I went over to 670 The Score in kind of a little bit of a larger producing role.
The 2009, this is where the Adam Jahns starts to appear on newspapers.com. I've got a White Sox story from Adam.
White Sox story.
White Sox. Here we go. Here's the lead.
No.
Being able to play multiple positions has never been a bad thing, especially if it means one thing: playing time. With that in mind, Josh Fields got to start Wednesday night at first base.
It's not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Kevin, I was already going through my 09 Rolodex. I'm like, is this a Carlos Quentin story when he broke his hand? We're in the race. That might have been 08 though. But yeah,
09. So now I am. I mean, we're skipping a few years here. So you want more? You want to read more? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to ask you, because the other one I had, which was from maybe just a couple weeks earlier. this is your lead on a Hawks story. For the most part, the Blackhawks were at a loss for words. They just couldn't seem to find a way to describe the 6-1 thumping the Detroit Red Wings handed them Sunday in Game 4 at the United Center. But the 56 penalty minutes, including 18 for roughing, 2 10-minute misconducts, and 1 game misconduct, should speak for themselves.
That's not bad.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
But, well, you can get to how you got to this point, but it seems like in 2009, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. So my first job, like my first union job at the Sun-Times, because it's a union paper, was on the Chicago Sun-Times Newswire, Stingwire, I think it was called, Chicago Sun-Times News Group Newswire, and it was a news job. Like you're calling police stations, you're getting police blotters, you're working with fire department, communication departments, not only Chicago but various suburbs, and I hated it. If I'm being honest, like I worked midnights. But that was my entry. Like instead of just being paid $10 an hour as like a freelancer, which I was basically when I'm answering the phones, this opportunity came along. So a lot of the preppers on this prep desk took these opportunities and became news reporters for a little bit. Some of them actually stuck with it. Tina Sfondilis, she's political writer for the Chicago Sun-Times, and where'd she go before she left for a little bit? But anyway, I work in midnights, so imagine like arriving to the office at like 11:45 p.m. and then like heading home at 8. Those are my hours for a little bit, midnight to 8 in the morning, and then I would sleep and I would go back to the office at night to do to work the prep desk if it was Friday or Saturday night, and so the Stingwire would never scheduled me for those days because the high school desk needed me. But that was my life for a bit. And I think by doing that, you get noticed a bit. Like you're putting in these hours, you're showing off a work ethic, you're learning on the fly, you're producing for a company. And I think just by being seen, just by being there, showing up for work and doing jobs that, let's face it, like some didn't want to do. Like I got noticed in the office, and eventually my next job became assisting Michael O'Brien, who's still at the Sun-Times right now. Now he's like his own little, he's a legend in the Chicago high school sports world. But the Sun-Times launched YourSeason.com, which was this all-encompassing high school sports website. And the amount of traffic that we did, we're like so proud of it. But this is when the Chicago Sun-Times owned all these little regional papers from Aurora to Naperville to Elgin, and we just pulled all this coverage into this website. But by editing that, I got other opportunities to write stories on the prep desk. And then by 2009, Chris DeLuca was the sports editor, and I started going out helping at Hawks games, helping at Bulls games, going to the Crosstown series between the Cubs and the White Sox, and filling in where they needed me. Like one of the first Bears games I ever covered. This is gonna be wild to you. I sat next to Brad Biggs and Mike Mulligan, and we worked together. Believe it or not, like we were together.
Would Brad Biggs admit to this today?
Yes, he probably remembers it. I remember him.
That wasn't the question. It was would he admit to it?
Going into the Bears locker room after the game. Who was the running back? Khalil Bell? Did that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So he broke off like this long run on like a Monday night game, and we needed a little sidebar. So I wrote the 400-word sidebar on him, but this is when like coordinators would talk after games. So Ron Turner is in there, and I remember Biggs looking at me, giving me a nod, and asking a question about Bell to Turner, and I used it in my story. Just kind of random memories from helping out in different places. But like to follow Hoge's lead here, like if there's any college writers or whatnot listening right now, like I never said no to an assignment, like at all. Like I went to La Rabida Hospital on the South Side on the day of a Kenny Chesney concert down at Soldier Field, and I missed like the full tailgate. But Jay Cutler was making his first appearance down there, and the Sun-Times had nobody to go cover it. Biggs was out of town or something, and he passed along the assignment to, I think, Chris DeLuca at the time, and it was then passed to me. Or maybe it was Stu Courtney who left the Sun-Times for the Tribune, and I said yes. And one of my first bylines, if you can find it at newspapers.com, is me talking to Jay Cutler at La Rabida Hospital on the Chicago South Side.
Wow. I should try to find that one. The Hoge, you I don't want to gloss over how you got your job at the Score. You kind of mentioned that there was an opening there because like your big start in Chicago, how people kind of knew you was at the Score. So there's an opening, you're available. How does that kind of all come to be?
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother side story that some people in the media will I don't know, either hate reliving or love having brought back up. But do you guys remember Webbio?
Yes. Yeah.
The old
tell the listeners
scheme.
what Webbio was.
So Webbio,
Ponzi scheme.
It was.
Yeah.
David Hernandez went to prison for legitimately went to prison over it. So there was, and it was a little bit ahead of its time. In hindsight, it wasn't the worst idea. But they basically tried to start like an online streaming sports radio station. Is the best way I would explain it. And they poached a bunch of talent from both ESPN 1000 and the Score. They took a lot of people from the Score, and so that's why they had jobs open. And I was, doing my thing at WGN Radio, producing. I should also shout out Cap because that was a huge part of the internship originally was, producing Sports Central at night. And it was a great internship because Carm, speaking of passing things off, he'd pass the whole show off to you. So I'd book the guests. I'd write Cap's updates because he was doing the updates from what was then Comcast Sportsnet back then. He would do his afternoon updates from there. And I would literally write them for him and email them to him, and then he would do them, and he just trusted you. He was going to read whatever you wrote in there. So it was a great experience. It was a phenomenal experience. And so that when I just found out like, hey, there's probably openings at the Score, I reached out and same thing, got the interview, told them what I was doing, and just kind of goes with what Johns was just saying. Like, just say yes to everything, get as much experience in everything as you possibly can, because while it might be frustrating waiting for the opportunities, when the door does open, when you can burst through it and be like, I've already written updates for Cap, I've already produced Sports Central, I produced the Blackhawks games. There were going to be few people trying to. A lot of people would want those jobs, but a few that would already have that resume, right? Like a year or two into it already. So that's how I got my door in the Score. And then a little side story. My first ever show at the Score that I helped produce, I sat next to Jay Zawoski, and it was Mike Murphy's last show.
Wow, okay.
Wow.
And it was quite an eye-opening experience because Jay was like, don't do this, don't do this. Make sure you write out the calls on the screen exactly like this or he's going to get mad. And just do it because this is the last day. Please help me get through this. It was fantastic.
Oh, how would you kind of describe how you became like the 670score.com's Bears person? Because that's ultimately like you were obviously now known for your Bears work, but it started at the Score. So how would you tell that story?
So that's where this whole thing comes back. I was sort of joking off the top that I had all this writing experience. I wanted to write. I got a journalism degree, and then I immediately went into radio. But this is another good piece of advice. Like, I don't care if you're in radio, TV, or writing. Like, you need to know how to write. So when I think it started while I was still producing. I think it weirdly actually started with WBBM 780. But this was kind of around the time when these news sites realized like they needed written material up on the website. They needed written versions of these stories. And there's very few people working in the radio stations unless you're just going to like literally take their copy that they're reading on the news, which you can do, and some places still do that. But so they realized I could do this, and it started with some bad shifts, like Christmas Day. Come down here and write up news stories for WBBM, because they was all part of the same company for CBS. Eventually, they decided to merge CBS 2, BBM Radio, and The Score into CBS Sports or CBSChicago.com. And they needed somebody to head up all the sports content. So the easiest way to explain it, I don't know if it was my exact title, but I was essentially the sports editor for CBSChicago.com. And that was actually my first full-time opportunity. So all that time leading up to that, I was part-time radio. I was also freelancing at Big Ten Network because it just paid better. It was TV. And this is my opportunity to shout out my wife, because I never would have made it as far as I did without her, getting out of school and working full-time as an occupational therapist and being outstanding at it. So, that financial support was critical in me being able to ride that wave as long as I could until I finally got that full-time opportunity to take over as, the sports editor. And then at that point, you do what any editor in this town, I think, is going to do, and realize the Bears are king. We need to cover this. We need more Bears coverage. And at the time, there weren't many resources. So the best resource was just me going to Hallis Hall, me going to the games. I think the first season, so that would have been 2011, I only covered the home games. But by the next season, it goes into how many things can you do well. Well, I could write, and by the way, I could get the sound. So they made a decision, well, you should cover the road games too and do both. And that's kind of how it started in the 2012 season. And by 2013, I was pretty much as I was still having to deal with the whole website, but I was on a daily basis pretty much covering the Bears.
I ask everybody on the show, and you guys know this, what your welcome to the big leagues moment was. So if you think back to those early days, and it could be people take this and sometimes it's like somebody getting mad at them or realizing, hey, people know who I am in this town. It could be kind of more on the positive. So if you think about that, your welcome to big leagues moment kind of as your career's gotten underway, what comes to mind?
You wanted to think about yours a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I have one. I'll give one example of like learning on the fly.
I was going to say John's is when the guy in Bourbonnais asked him for his autograph.
He asked everybody for his autograph, their autograph. I kind of, it's kind of funny. Like my first assignment for the Green Bay News Chronicle was covering UWGB men's basketball, and so I go to this game and I go to the press conference afterwards, and my receiver broke. My recorder broke, and this was like my first big assignment. Like I'm supposed to go to the office after it, file it. The Sunday editor comes in the next day, and then it's going to print. So like I'm panicking, and I remember just like writing down notes furiously to make sure I had something quoted, and they were like the shortest quotes because I was so paranoid about being misquoted, and I kept looking for like. I mean, this is at a time where there's no Twitter really. These websites aren't broadcasting these interviews, so my little notebook was that was my recording at the moment. Go to Hoge now. I got some Blackhawks stories I think I'm going to fit into this podcast coming up next.
Yeah, I mean, mine is probably a story that almost all of us have dealt with at some point, but it took a few years before you realize like, oh, these teams actually do read you or listen to you, and
oh yeah,
some of the front office people care. Mine, but though, is not a Bears thing. It's actually Rick Hahn with the White Sox, and it kind of came out of nowhere for me to the point that to this day I can't even really remember what it was about. But I wrote something, and at some point, I think this was actually when I was back at WGN, and we were trying to we put in a request to like see if Rick Hahn would come on our weekend show, and it was basically like, no, he's not coming on your show. He was unhappy about something. And but the reason why I feel comfortable talking about this is because I was like, okay, well, how do I fix this, right? Like how, and so, thanks to Sox PR, I came out to the ballpark. After I think he talked to the media, I talked to him off on the side. We talked it out because I really didn't even really know what it was about, and then we talked it out, and I was like, no, you kind of have a point, yeah, but this is where I was coming from, this is where he was coming from, and you like that's gonna happen in your career, probably quite frequently at some point if you're doing your job correctly. It's just gonna happen. Sometimes you're gonna have to agree to disagree, but for me at that point in my career, it was very eye-opening because I had made it quite a decent amount without like something like that happening, and I was like, oh, this is like they actually do care what you're saying. They pay attention, and it's good because it helps your own accountability, right? And it was a good experience that I hadn't quite realized, and it was sort of this, big leagues. This is big leagues. We are covering GMs at the highest level of their sport or head coaches at the highest level of their sport, and you got to be conscious of that.
Like I quickly learned on this job that they're real people. Like you kind of grow up, like they're on TV, like they're celebrities, they're rich and famous, but you know what? They're still real people with real problems and different things going on off the field, off the court, off the ice. And I always, like in my early stages, kind of took that with me wherever I went, just in terms of my storytelling and story pursuit, and just kind of like the writer that I wanted to be, and I think I've become. But so in 2009, 2010, I take over the Blackhawks beat. And everybody knows that's the year they win, like their first, they end their drought, right? They win the Stanley Cup. It's a crazy, unbelievable season. So that's like the whole season for me is baptism by fire. But as I'm kind of transitioning into this role of, I was working with Lenzyme and I was going to take it over for him at some point. So that this kind of happens. One of the first big stories that I did that was on the back pages of this, when it was on the back page of the Chicago Sun-Times, was the limousine pictures in Vancouver. Remember that? Yeah. They all had their shirts off. John Madden is flexing. Christopher Stieg, Patrick Kane is there with the girls in the limo, and they're drinking kokanees. So the Sun-Times takes those pictures and puts them on the back page, and I do a story on it. Like I reached out. This is now it's like media's changing at this point. So I reached out to the bloggers who actually got these photos, and I talked to them. So the story that we do in the Sun-Times is actually having fun with it. Like Rick Morrissey writes a column about these guys having fun, and they're winning, and everybody's having fun with it. But the Blackhawks, like I joined them on a road trip later on, like not too long after that, and they were pissed. they were furious as an organization. As a young writer at that point, I was 27 years old. That was definitely difficult and different. It takes, like, that was something new to navigate. But I learned early on that sometimes conflict, like Hoge's story, helps with relationships, helps make you better, helps get them to know you, and then you kind of work through things a bit. And then I feel like by the end of it, like that locker room, like I was good in. Like I could work with Taze, I could work with Hossa. I did stories on Sharp, Keith. Like I got to know like a lot of their families just by the storytelling and whatnot. Marty Turco when he came and went, all sorts of different stories. But yeah, that was definitely an interesting few days. Everybody remembers those limousine photos, but Adam Johns wrote about it. We put it in the back page of the Sun-Times, and then I showed up and I think in Calgary, and had to answer for it in the locker room.
Oh. My welcome to big leagues moment was about a year and a half ago. I had to go replace windshield at Safelite, and this guy walking out as I was walking in held the door for me. It's like, "Are you Fishbain from Hoge and Jahns?"
Yes.
I was like,
that was it.
That was it. So, which is my segue to Hoge and Jahns. This is a triple origin story episode, and shout out Lawrence Holmes of 670 Score, because I had chatted with Lawrence before I even launched this podcast, and it was his suggestion to have the two of you on and do this episode to kind of ultimately find out how Hoge and Jahns began. And it's, as you said, the 10-year anniversary from when your guys' podcast launched. And I guess we'll yada, 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 Hoge, Bears beat writer. Then this other radio station launches and he goes there, and, that was kind of exciting. And then he stays at WGN, and Jahns switches from Blackhawks to Bears at the Sun-Times. So, Hoge, you're at WGN covering the Bears. Jahns, you're at the Sun-Times. And Hoge, I'll kind of let you take it from here on how this podcast began.
Yeah, well, it all goes back to Phil Emery shouting out David Haw at the combine when he wasn't even there for starting 87-7 the game. Yeah, so I mean, but I have to bring that up a little bit because that opportunity that I got to leave the Score / CBS Chicago.com, because it was like, while I was covering the team and I was building, that part of my career, I was still dealing with all this other stuff, trying to run that website at the same time. So this was my first opportunity to be like, no, you're going to go cover the Bears on a daily basis. That's what you're going to do. You're going to go on all these shows every single day. But that radio station only lasted 10 months, and I was only part of it for like 4.5 because they didn't hire me till June. And then I actually missed a lot of training camp that year because my son was born and he had a bunch of health complications, which people have sort of heard that story over the years. But I missed a lot of training camp because my family was up in northern Wisconsin because he was born 10 weeks early. So anyway, I get in the flow of doing all this. And so for I'm talking more Bears finally for the first time in my career on a daily basis. And then all of a sudden it's like right around November, this thing's going away at the end of the year. I was very lucky they kept me in WGN to continue covering the team. But WGN Radio is not come on every show every day and do a hit and be the main reporter. It's like you'll go on Steve Cochran's show on Monday morning after the games, and then you'll file some raps to Dave Ennett for the morning sports. So I felt like this, like I have all these Bears thoughts. I have to get this out somehow. So we're in training camp 2015, the following training camp, and I was like, I basically asked, can I start a podcast? Like, I'm not gonna ask for any more money. I feel like I have things to say. Just writing in the website isn't enough. So we start the podcast. It was originally called Intentional Grounding, and it started with me, just with a tape recorder, basically interviewing different beat reporters. Now, I don't know if I've already spoiled this to you or not recently because I had to go back and look this up, but do you know who the first Hoge and Jahns guest was? It's a shocking answer.
First intentional grounding guest.
Great point. Intentional grounding. First episode ever.
Was it a Bears beat reporter?
It's a current Bears beat reporter.
Wow.
It was Dan Weeder.
I was just going to, Dan Weeder. Okay.
Because we did a show like the day before report day in WGN Radio Studios, and he came in and was nice enough to do it. So he was the first one. And then it was like Moon. But I kept coming back to Jahns a couple times, and it has to do with him covering the Blackhawks, because part of my responsibilities when I was at the Score, kind of juggling multiple teams, was during, especially the 2013 Cup run, I spent a lot of time and even traveled a little bit on some of those trips in the playoffs. And because we were similar age, and I don't know, credit to Jahns, he kind of took me under his wing because I didn't know what the hell I was doing or any of the people in the room or, how to ask. Yeah, basically how anything worked with Blackhawks at the time. So we had kind of developed a friendship already, and so I kept coming back to him a little bit more than the other guys. And I think by the time the season started, maybe even late August, I just was like, hey, you want to keep doing this every episode, and we'll try to build this up together. And that's how it was for the rest of that season. It was intentional grounding, and he would come over. We lived very close together. We could walk between our houses, actually, although he would always drive. And he would,
I did. I don't think I walked once.
No, but you could. And he would come over. We would record in my basement. There was no video at the time, of course. We would just basically do it into a recorder, and upload it like a podcast back in the true podcast days, and eventually it changed to Hoge and Jahns, and 10 years later, here we are.
What I remember is I remember recording outside the library, inside the library at Olivet Nazarene University, and just doing the interviews recording intentional grounding at like various locations on campus, right? Like, it was always kind of outside at first, or then the library, and we got to use that library for like a year, right? How long were we in that library? Like a year?
A couple of years, I think.
Was it a couple of years?
Yeah, because they kicked us out of John Fox kicked us out of the lunchroom, so we had to eat our lunch in there. And
before we got put on, like, then we were above the gym in those meeting rooms. Remember that?
Oh yeah, that's probably the last place.
Those were the last places. Oh my gosh, those stairwells were crazy.
Yeah,
JD would just host his ESPN radio shows in there. Just like we'd be all in there, like peacefully writing about the Bears, and he'd be yelling about LeBron on some national Sunday show.
Yeah. Those are actually great memories, because JD used to do like his hits in the media room. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
We would all sit there and just listen to him. We had no idea what they were asking, but he was JD, the absolute best. But I remember doing the podcast, and you would have like these rundowns of all the things we wanted to hit on. And I'm like, when we were coming in today, I was trying to remember everything that you had like on your list, but like, I don't know, MVP of the game, like 3 things to watch.
We were way more structured back then. Way more structured.
Yes, yeah, you had a full rundown. Some stupid college football segment.
I would make them do college football every week.
But yeah, I don't know. I think Adam and I we were friends. We had beers. We were like bags partners a lot in Bourbonnais. We hung out. We talked Bears together, and it eventually became a podcast. And that podcast actually has evolved so much, because then we started doing it at your other house in Vernon Hills, and there was still like a rundown element, and then that changed, and now we just talk to no end. We still do certain bits and whatnot, but
COVID changed a lot of that, because that's when how we're recording this right now started to change. You just start doing everything over Zoom, and you're like, oh, this is way more efficient. And not every show works well that way. I mean, but I think we had done enough shows and had enough chemistry at the time that it's still how we do it.
We want to make sure you guys. This is going to be a long episode anyways. Do you want to be longer than the Mark Potash episode?
I'm guessing, so we're at minute 45 with Hoge and Jahns right now. I'm guessing with Potash's episode, you asked 2 questions at this point.
Well, remember, I had to come back in and record an extra segment because he forgot to tell me 2 phenomenal stories from his time in Arkansas. So I made him record an extra, what I thought was going to be an extra 5 minutes, turned into an extra 15 minutes. But we will wrap here.
Hold on, let me give you a good Mark Potash story.
Okay, give me your Potsy story.
All right. So we're in Vancouver for the 2010. That'll be the quarterfinals, right? Yes. So it wasn't the first round. So it's Nashville, and then we go to Vancouver. So we're in Vancouver. Yeah. And those deadlines suck out there on the West Coast. So it's me, Potash, and Rick Morrissey covering the Blackhawks against Roberto Luongo and the Vancouver Canucks. And just an amazing series. The rivalry was fantastic, right? So we're all on tight deadline. So we watch the game, and we hustle down to the media room. Sometimes we watch the end of the game in the media room. That's the secret of how things work, for us in the media. And I just remember Potsy slamming his computer, packing his stuff up, and walking out the door. So me and Morrissey are still in deadline. We're still writing. We come back. We update our stories. Mark's nowhere to be found. We're calling him. We're texting him. We're yelling down the hallways. Where's Mark Potash? Right? This is Vancouver. We're all taking cabs together. It's like 2 a.m. in Vancouver. So Rick and I, we finally get a taxi, and we're heading back to our hotel. We got the early morning flight, back to Chicago. And that scene in Pulp Fiction where you're stopped at the light, and who is it? Ving Rhames is walking across the street, and he stops. Posse doesn't stop, but there's Mark Potash walking across the street in front of us. And I remember going to Morrissey, the Viper. I go, should we say something? And he goes, no, just let him be. 2:30 in the morning in Vancouver.
What was he mad about?
Like, he missed his deadline. I believe he missed his deadline. He had the worst deadline of the three. I got to refile. Morrissey got to refile, and he didn't get to refile. So he was I'm sure he's got a different recollection of this. I can't wait for him to listen to this and text me. But to see him later, like, crossing the street as we're at the stoplight, as he crosses in front of us, I'll never forget it. Just those are the moments, like, doing this job with you guys and everybody on different beats, like, you come to love. Those are the best stories, I think.
That's amazing. Everyone should obviously go listen to Mark Potash episode 10, and you'll get to hear and that story will resonate even more when you learn a little bit about Potsy. Okay, every episode kind of ends with some advice, and you guys have touched on some good stuff already, but you talk to a lot of younger people trying to break in. I think CHGO is really fascinating too, because this is a new media entity that you guys are working for. And if you think about where you guys started, right? Jahns, you're at the Sun-Times, you talk about old school, you're taking these calls, right? And Hoge, you're producing at WGN Radio, which is just like such an entity in this town and been here forever. And now it's a different era in journalism. It's a fun era, I think, still, because you have so many outlets, opportunities, but you guys had to do a lot of grunt work to get to where you are today, and you had to learn a lot of different things. So with that long preamble, what advice do you give to people who want to break into sports media?
Yeah, oh man, I got a lot. I mean, one of them we already talked about, which was you got to be willing to say yes to a lot of things. And really, it's almost more about never saying no. I mean, because every yes can lead to another opportunity, and you got to be willing to take chances at times too. And so I'll give you a more recent example, because when I went to, I think it was I did 2 Super Bowl radio rows for WGN, so Minnesota and Atlanta. And then they weren't going to let me go to Miami. And I wasn't going. And then I watched the AFC NFC Championship game weekend, and I'm like, I got to go. Because I had already done 2 years where I'd, like, crushed it with all these interviews, was pretty much the only one in Chicago that was there. And at least on the radio side of things, TV side of things, whatever. And I call, and at that point, like, it's too late to get credentials. So I'll shout out Brandon Faber, who was with the Bears. I called him. I go, hey, is there any way I can still get a credential? Can you help me out here at all? And he did, and I managed to get a credential, and I just went. I just sort of went on my own. And I got home, and about a week later, it might have even been a week, I get a call from Mike Allardyce at NBC Sports Chicago. And, hey, we have this opportunity. Would you consider it? And I, to this day, don't think I would have gotten that phone call without going to this. And that's well into my career. So, like, that's still, like, I don't always advise, spending your own money all the time. But there's times that call for it. And just sort of taking chances and understanding that is this business. You have to sort of refuse the answer no sometimes to keep making it. So that's a big piece of advice. But I would even back up all the way to the beginning, because I see a lot of people who think they want to do this, and then they get in it and they don't really understand what it takes, or understand that. And this is not a complaint, because people don't ever want to hear us complain, but it is still a job, and it's not always. It's a lot of times it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but there are plenty other times where it's not as fun as you might think it is all the time, and you get burned out and things like that. So that's my other thing is like if you think you want to get in this business, you have to really, really want to get in it, because if you are sort of only wishy-washy or half in, A, you're not going to make it, and B, you're not going to enjoy yourself at all.
Yeah, I think you have to understand that there's some sacrifices involved. Social time, family time. I remember leaving my son's preschool function, like my oldest son's preschool function. What was it? I don't even remember what it was, but I remember what news was breaking. The police report of Jeremiah Ratliff. Finally got that as that story was blowing up. I remember pulling over on the side of the road as I got confirmation from Jonathan Taze on something. Like, pulled over on the highway just to tweet it on the Kennedy. Even when I was like a high school reporter, like bringing my recorder with me because a coach said he had to call me at 9, and here I am out with my girlfriend, now my wife now, and we're at a bar, but I have to make a phone call to do this interview. Like, there's certain sacrifices as a reporter you kind of have to make, because there's like your time, but you're writing stories on everybody else's time. If does that make sense? Like,
yep.
Like, news doesn't break at the most convenient moments. It doesn't break between 9 and 5, and all sorts of things. Like learning how to operate on little sleep, learning how to grind to 1 in the morning, and then get up for a flight to like from 5, or driving from Edmonton to Calgary. There's sacrifices involved. But I think like throughout all that, like if I could give any advice to like young reporters who are like in the door at that point, and you're sacrificing and you're doing all sorts of stories and whatnot. Like at some point, like don't take yourself too serious. Like if you have a sense of humor about things. Not everything is the end of the world. Like sometimes it's okay to have that beer, or sometimes it's okay to laugh at yourself for messing up. Like when Kevin was reading some of my old bylines, like I was kind of scared of what they were going to be. Like I'd write them differently, but it's okay to mess up once in a while. It really is, but have a sense of humor about yourself is probably one way I would put it. So maybe don't take yourself too seriously once you get in the door, because this job will wear you out in a sense. Like as Adam was saying, it'll burn you out before you know it.
I think it's great advice too, because I was saying this to somebody the other day. Yes, it's big business that we're covering. These are real people and real lives and real jobs in the line. It's a kid's game.
Yeah.
These are all. It's sports. It's fun, and we're fortunate to be where we're at. And this is the part of the episode where I tell my guests how much I appreciate them as people and their time. And,
You're skipping that?
I might just cut it. No. Adam Hoge and Adam Jahns. You can listen to their podcast, the Hoge and Jahns podcast, and check them out at CHGO. I'll be on the podcast again at some point, to be determined. Whoa. Yeah, well, sure. We'll do I don't know if it'll be a one-off or I don't know. We'll see. We'll find a time. We'll make it happen. I mentioned this in the intro, but I was obviously a regular part of the pod for, I guess, 6 years, and I'm sure I was on intentional grounding at some point. And I was thinking back to my first Bears podcast in 2015. Hoge was my first guest, as we were all trying to start podcasts and try to figure that out. And and Hoge, listening to you talk about how John's kind of helped show you the way. John's helped showed me the way. My first time as a Bears beat writer, and I was
showed you the way to TJ Donlands.
Showed me the way to where to get beers after the first day of training camp, and then in came Adam Hoge, who I just knew as this guy who was like, you're kind of critical of Northwestern football, but I guess I'll give you a chance. And look at the three of us now. So
and then I saved Northwestern.
You did. Northwestern had a nice little run there.
Great 6-year run.
With,
I still
with
think
the
I
other
deserve more
sidelines.
credit.
Yeah, I should go find some of those 2012 stories. There was something I just remember for whatever reason I had this God, I can't believe what Hoge wrote about Northwestern. It was like 2012 or something. And then when I met you, I'm like, oh man, he's a really good guy. He didn't mean what he said about the Cats. You might have meant what you said.
See, but that might have been the first time Pat Fitzgerald ever heard of me.
That's true.
Getting back to that, for all I know.
Yeah.
So, maybe it worked out. I don't know.
And all these things happened at TJ Donlands, the watering hole in Bourbonnais. So, anyways, this has been a lot of fun. You guys officially passed Mark Potash as the longest episode in the history of Breaking In. Hoge and Jahns, thank you for joining the show and telling everybody how you broke in.
See ya.
Thanks, Kevin.
Oh, come on. See ya.